Hello, bonjour.
Welcome to Pardon Our French with Quincy and Justine. And today we are joined by the third musketeer, Lucie.
Welcome. No, there are actually 4 musketeers.
What?
Okay.
This is a classic Lucie.
Yes, it is.
Lucie
It's for
here with the facts. Whatever, the sentiment stands.
Yes.
Hello, Lucie. Welcome to our podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We're very excited you're our first guest. For context, I met Lucie actually before I met you, Justine.
Really?
Or no.
No.
No,
Oh.
sorry. Wait, never mind.
Lies.
Fake news on the podcast. First of all, there are 4 musketeers. Second of all, she met Justine first. Well, you met Justine. Justine and
I met Justine in January.
Yeah, because we
And then I
arrived
met
here
you. But
on
I
the
think I
same
was
day.
talking with you. This sounds very like...
Yeah, you guys were messaging.
We were messaging.
Yeah,
which
but we
is-
hadn't gotten to any bases yet. No, I'm kidding. You slid into my DMs and asked me to go get a drink.
I also slid into her DMs. This is like a pattern that is making me uncomfortable.
It's a pattern, but it's worked because we're your 2 closest friends
This
here.
is true. This is true. Yeah. I think I saw that you had American in Paris in your bio.
No, I would have never done that. No, I'm kidding. I probably did have it in my bio at some point.
Yeah, how'd you find her on Instagram?
Well, because I think she followed my travel Instagram and that was her bio. And so then I was like, oh. And then I reached out to her like that.
Okay.
Because I was...
Oh, yeah, you were public at
I
the
was
time.
public at
Okay,
that
that's
time,
why. I was like,
yeah.
wait, she's a private account. How did that happen?
Yeah.
No, that was before I was a big city girl and realized I needed to be private.
Yeah. Yeah, so I reached out to you, and then we were talking maybe for like a week or 2, and then I was actually going to New York, so we didn't meet up until the beginning of June of 2021. Mm-hmm. And we met, or I invited you to go get a drink at this place that was a little bit out of our price range. I didn't know. It was like a friend recommended it to me, and we both ordered the cheapest thing on the menu.
Which was a 20 euro Aperol Spritz, which should be illegal in the
Really
country
should
of
be.
France.
Yes. And then we very quickly realized that we actually live like 2 blocks away from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 streets, really.
Yeah, 3-minute walk.
It was
Yeah.
so close.
So that kind of was like, oh. And then we're like, why are we over here then? Because we were on the other side of the river and we both like made the trek.
Yeah.
But neither of us said anything about it.
Yeah.
Was the place still cool, though?
I like expected it well, because it was like super fancy.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize we would be like on the road, which was a little weird.
Yeah, because it's like right near the Musée d'Orsay.
Okay.
Basically.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
okay.
called Le Voltaire.
Voltaire.
And it was like, oh, you can see the Seine, which is nice, but I don't know.
You're like,
So if
on
you
the
want a
road.
fancy experience by the Seine, but on the street and
on the
way
street.
expensive, go there.
Go there, exactly.
I mean, they were really nice, but they were kind of like, these girls accidentally came here.
And at the time, you guys were both students, too. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We were
They're
like
they're like, are
perusing
you
the
wearing
menu."
Old Navy? Like,
Yeah. And then the second time we hung out, we were like, okay, let's opt for a cheaper option. Let's get a bottle of wine and go to the to Invalides because there's some grass there that you can kind of post up on and have a picnic. So we like went to the opposite vibe.
yeah.
And that night we inadvertently attended a like
Illegal Project X party filled
Yeah.
with 16-year-olds.
yeah, it was like teenagers and we were like
We show up and we're there and we're like, because this was like the semi-lockdown. So I can't remember if there was a curfew. I think there was, but it was later. It was at like 8 p.m. or something.
Yeah.
But you couldn't gather in groups of more than like 5
Yeah.
people, and you had to be outside, and like stuff was still closed and stuff. And we get there, and we're like, there's a lot of like teenagers here.
and it was just busy. We were like,
And
wow,
it
I
was
guess
super
this is the
simple.
place to
Wow,
be.
yeah.
Like
There's a lot of like, and there's like, oh, there's lots of teenagers
How
here.
did you hear about this?
No, we just went there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
we just
And
were
then all of a
there.
sudden, it's like it gets night. We're like, oh, okay, maybe it was like 11 or something. Because
Yeah.
there was that time when the curfew was 11 p.m. And then these like teenagers were talking to us, and I'm pretty sure I insulted them. And then
We were like, go get vaccinated.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
you
they
were.
were like, there's like this 17-year-old boy trying to hit on Lucie.
Yeah.
And we're like, are you vaccinated? Like,
I'm
you
like,
should
I
go
can be
get
your mother,
shots.
which is not true. But and then all of a sudden, we're like sitting, and then this French girl comes up to us and is like, the police are coming. Like, she's like, run. run. And I like had taken off my shoes because we were on the grass. And so then I had to like put them back on. We like ran to the metro.
Yeah.
And it was like, there was like tear gas and stuff. And,
No way.
And then we read about it the next day in the newspaper. It was all over all the newspapers. And it was like, Project X Party, like tear gas, like 10 minutes after
It was
I do remember that.
It was apparently this like whole like secret thing on social media where like all
It was happening a lot.
Yeah, and
we
they
were,
had
like, not
like
cool enough to know
all
about it.
decided to figure because we were not 16. We were way
yeah,
cooler
that's
than them.
Yeah.
And then they all like were there and I'm like, oh, okay. But I remember the metro came and everybody clapped.
Yeah. Oh, and then we got on the metro and someone wasn't wearing their mask and we shamed them for it.
We shamed them for it, yeah.
Shamers.
We're like, you think you're better than all of us? You think you're like above us? Like, put on your mask.
He did. He
And then
put on
some
his
girl
mask.
was like, thank you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he did. He put on his mask.
The amount of people who had their mask like underneath their nostrils pissed me off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, you might as well not wear it.
Yeah, for real.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was like those were the early days of Quincy
Yeah.
and Lucie.
And then I think I met you once. I think the first time I met you was maybe after summer.
Yeah, maybe like in the early fall.
I think because Elora was with me, and she had just arrived for her first 3 months in Paris.
Her first stint.
Yes.
And so now we are the 3 out of 4, apparently, musketeers.
Jacques can be our fourth.
the reluctant 4 against his will.
So funny. And then we all lived next to each other for a while,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
Lucie left us.
Well, okay. I went from a 3-minute walk to an 8-minute walk. Sorry.
From Quincy's, it's like 15 for me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But it's still really cute. Your apartment's so cute.
Yeah, I needed to not live in a studio.
Yeah.
My cat demanded it.
Yes.
But yeah, so I came here the same day Justine did, actually,
Yeah.
which we didn't realize. We
Potentially on the same flight. We have not figured it out
have
yet.
not figured it out
January
yet.
6th?
It was January 6th. It was a
Of 2021.
Yeah.
narrow escape.
And then we had the lockdown like 5 days later.
5 days later. I'm like, oh, yay. Welcome to France.
Wonderful.
But I also came here for my master's. I had actually lived in France as a child. I mean, I was like, what is that age when you're like 12?
You're
Yeah,
in middle
tween.
school.
Yeah, 12 to 14. So in the South, so it was always something on my to-do life list to come back here. So
And now you're staying indefinitely.
yeah, pretty much as soon as I either like pax somebody or get citizenship.
Yeah, because the other option is going back home.
Yeah,
And-
I don't really think that's an option. But.
Well, your parents also
Oh yeah,
live
my
in
parents
Europe
live in
too.
Europe now too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That makes things nice. I feel it like cements like
yeah,
your
yeah.
life here.
I mean, hey, they left in 2016 and it just happened to coincide with a specific election. They had said they were like, we're gonna leave if he wins, and then my mom got a job in Barcelona, and they're like, okay, now we are gonna leave. I was like, good for you sticking to your word.
It was like a low-key manifestation.
Yeah, it was. I think it was.
Aw. Well, today we wanted to talk about culture shock, reverse culture shock in particular, because I
Yes.
feel like a lot of people who move to France from the U.S., when they go back to the U.S., they don't realize that like they've assimilated to the French ways, and then they go back and they're like, "Whoa, I'm seeing my land in a different lens."
Yeah,
definitely.
It does provide a very interesting perspective of your own country
Really.
on a general level in terms of culture and politics and all that, but then also just like on a small scale when you go back to your communities and
Yeah. And it also makes you realize like the American things in you that you keep.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I must eat Chick-fil-A when I arrive to the airport.
oh my gosh.
And I'm very excited about the AC in every establishment in the
Yeah,
suburbs.
Justine and I are sweaty women.
We are sweaty women. Or swampy, as Quincy likes
Swampy.
to call it.
I know I did send them the New York Times article.
Yeah, I know. She said I felt personally attacked. Also, I'd read it 3 days earlier because I saw it on my New York Times. So I was like, I've already read this.
Sweat less. Is that
Yeah,
what it was?
yeah. Well, it was really.
I said
we're
that
not gonna talk
I
about
thought
this
of
now.
you.
Apparently, some people have different like genetic components that make them sweat more.
I would not be surprised
Yeah.
because I have those.
Yeah.
But then other things, for example, aside from Chick-fil-A, is that I really enjoy going to the doctors in the U.S.
Yes, I make all my dentist appointments when I go back to the U.S.
Gynecologist.
And I don't, because I don't have health insurance in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I accidentally, I needed to get my Zoloft prescription refilled because I forgot it and then realized that America doesn't take French. Because in like France, you just go to any pharmacy with your prescription and they're like, okay, da-da-da, and then they give it to you and it's great and inexpensive and stuff. But I realized I forgot to get it refilled, which was just stupid on my part, before I went back to South Carolina. And then I got there and I was like, oh shit. So I tried to make an appointment. They're like, well, you haven't been here in a year and a half. And I'm like, that's because I live out of the country. So you need to come in for a checkup. And I was like, okay. And then like 2 days later, I was like, wait a second. I called back and I'm like, so if I don't have health insurance, how much is this going to cost me? And they're like, a checkup? And I like hear a pause. She's like, $400. I was like,
Jesus.
Never mind. Yeah. I'll just figure something else out. And luckily my parents were still living there, so they still had health insurance. So kind of finagled something.
That's nice.
Got some meds. But still had to pay the uninsured price.
Of course.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I just realized as you were speaking that like I'm no longer on my
because you're 26. Yeah.
insurance. So I can no longer do that when I return.
That's why I got my wisdom teeth out last year, because I was like, I need to do this before
I got it out right before I came to France, because although I do love the French medical system, they're not known for their teeth.
No, it's just not a concern. And it's very apparent because even Jean, when we were talking about this, because I was like,
Jean thinks that's really funny.
Yeah. I was like, when was the last time you went to the dentist? And he was like, you don't need to go unless something's wrong.
Okay.
And I was like, what?
Okay, but now I'm kind of on that train, because I'm like, look, I haven't been to the gyno because nothing's been wrong. And then like I haven't been to the dentist because nothing's been wrong. And I'm like, I think it's capitalism. They're like, you need to go.
Quincy and I are boiling right now.
You need to go.
Trying to like contain myself.
They make you go and then spend money, and what do? Just like floss your teeth? Like I can do that on my own time.
I do have to say, I did go because I hadn't been to the U.S. and I actually went back. And if you don't book your cleaning appointment in the U.S. like in August for December,
you have to book it really far in advance.
They won't like fit you in. And I was like, I'm only in the country for like, I pulled that card. I was like, I'm only in the country for a week. Yeah. Could you fit me in? And they could not. So then I had to come and get my teeth cleaned here, and it had been like a year by that point, which is I usually do every 6 months.
Yeah, same. That's what they tell you to do.
That's what they
because of capitalism.
Yeah. So I go. So I go and I'm like, this must be the dirtiest my teeth have ever been.
Yeah.
And in the appointment, it takes like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it only feels like she's like spraying water on my teeth. And then she's like, we're done. And I'm like, you didn't do anything. There was no scraping. There was no, like, none of that.
They're telling me my gums were
she didn't floss me, any of this. And she was like, your teeth are impeccable. And I was like, I don't think they are, though. Mm-hmm. But I guess by their standards.
Well, yeah, that's what John said. He went not too long ago, and he was like, she said my teeth were perfect. And I was like, I beg to differ. Just kidding. I love you.
No, but they wanted to do a scan of my teeth because of my like permanent retainer, and I was like, oh no.
In the US.
Knowing the US, I was like, no pictures, no X-rays, no none of that, and I was like, I just don't have the money for that right now. And she was like, oh, it's okay, like we'll do it. It'll be like $1902 or something, and I was like, yeah, obviously cannot do that. That's way too much money. And she's like, no, less than $20, and I was like, oh. Okay, sure.
My favorite in France is when they shame you for not having a mutuelle, which so you have the carte vitale, which is your health insurance card, and then the mutuelle pays it's like your personal health private insurance, and that pays like any difference. And so when I just had the carte vitale, I would go and I would get my meds at the pharmacy, and they're like mutuelle, and I'm like, oh no, I don't have one, and they would always like give me this look. And they're like, well, you're gonna have to pay out of pocket. I'm like,
yeah, it's like it's inconveniencing them that you're gonna pay out of pocket.
And then she goes, okay, that'll be €4. I'm like, oh, but that's
you're gonna have to pay out of pocket a full €4. Yeah,
I'm like, I think I can afford that.
Yeah,
when the copay is $20.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, okay. But
that's so funny. So yeah, I guess I will not be going to my doctor's appointments.
Yeah, you will not be. Yeah. My parents took me off and then just didn't tell me, and so I went back.
Oh, how nice.
They're like, why would we pay for your health insurance? You live out of the country. And I'm like, I mean, that's fair.
Yeah,
good point.
That's fair. So
I think another thing that for me shocks me a lot, and then it makes me like question myself, is when I'm walking, like you arrive in the U.S. and you're walking around and people like talk to you.
Yeah, I know.
And they compliment you and they just like speak to you as if like you know each other. Like I remember being at the farmer's market and someone being like, "Oh my God, your bag's so cute." And like, "What are you getting here?" And I was like, "Do I know you? Like, do I literally had like
racking your brain. I'm like, where did I meet you?
Exactly.
No, you're not even from the South, too. It's completely different.
I can imagine.
You like, if you don't say hello and wave to somebody when you walk by them, they think you're a northerner and rude.
Wow.
But
that must have been what they thought I was.
No, literally, but now it's like weird for me because I'd be like, walking past and be like, "Hey," I'm like, "Oh, hey," and like I remember moving there when I was like 8 or 9 from Seattle, and people would say hi to my mom and she would say hi back, and I'm like, "Mother, do you know these people?" And she's like, "No, you just do that," and I'm like, "Okay." Yeah, but
you're French from the start.
Yeah, I know. I was too European for South Carolina and too American for France. But
story of my life.
Yeah, it is like everybody's super chatty and asks about your life all the time.
And French people see that as super superficial.
Yeah.
And like fake. And now I kind of get that. When I go back, I'm
yeah.
We don't know each other. Like, why are we expending our energy doing this?
Yeah.
No,
whereas before I was like, they're so nice. Everyone's so nice.
Yeah.
I went to visit Lucie in South Carolina, and that had been my first time really in the South, honestly.
And I would like to preface, it's Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, sorry.
The only place to visit.
Yeah, so I went to visit Lucie in Charleston, and I was like, so I obviously grew up in the Northeast, and then, was in Paris for, I guess, 2 years at that point. And I was like, why is everyone so elated? Like, is everyone okay? Like, I'm a little worried.
She's like, everybody's really happy.
Yeah. Like, the woman, like, at the counter of, like, wherever we were getting that, pulled pork or whatever. And she's like, "Have a blessed day." And I was like, "You too." Like, this is, like, just, I've never experienced this.
Let me get that for you, Buttercup.
Yeah, and I'm like, it was so bizarre to me. I was like, I'm clearly
she's like, "Is everybody really
out of
happy
place
here? I don't understand." And I'm like, well, I mean, it's not a big city too. So like even, compared to, LA, Chicago, New York, Boston, smaller cities are going to be a bit more.
But even
quote,
I took
hospitable.
John to California, he was like, "I don't like when they call you like hun and babe."
Yeah.
Why are they telling me that?
Hey, until they call you ma'am, you just really don't even.
So true.
Yeah, I know. And now I get called ma'am there, which like I can't tell if it's an insult or not, which is how I feel about madame here.
I hate being called madame.
The 16-year-old in my building madamed me, and I was like, "Who do you think you are?"
We're the same age.
I still, if I got pregnant, it would be a teenage pregnancy. But it's interesting to go back. There's definitely like I know people don't really like Parisians as much because they're kind of stereotypically snobby and whatever, but I kind of love the pettiness. And it's like everybody is judgy, but I mean everybody is judgy, but in the South everybody's judgy, but then like
behind your back.
This says like "bless your heart," which is actually an insult. Like
bless your heart.
And then they'll like go talk shit about you at book club. Like that's or like the church after social. Like that's just kind of how it is. And so like it's the same level of judgy. It's just one's more upfront than the other one.
And I think that's why French people are like, Americans are fake.
Yeah, definitely.
And I feel that hardcore now. Like I remember my first time landing back in the U.S. after I'd moved here. I'd only been in France for like 6 months. Not even actually. I got here in January. I left in May. And I remember getting off the plane in Atlanta, and this woman who like ran up to this group of girls and like, "Oh my God, I haven't seen you in so long. How are you? You look so good. You look so good." And it's like before they're even like seeing them. Like you haven't even looked at her. You're telling her she looks so good.
Also, Americans are so loud.
Yes.
Like I'd always heard French people and other people in Europe or just any other culture and nationality in general say like, oh, Americans are so loud. And I'm like, I don't really see that because if you're all so loud, then you all think you're the same. You're the same voice level, but you're actually just really, really loud. Yeah. So like now when we go out to restaurants and stuff and I'm like, oh, it's an American over there because you can hear them from 5 tables away.
Yeah. I was on a date with the 42-year-old and we both at the same time looked at each other and we were like, why is that one woman the only person we can hear right now?
Yeah, real.
But then when I get back like to South Carolina and stuff, it's like, oh, I have to be loud, I guess, or nobody's going to pay attention,
Or your friends are like, you've changed because you're like suddenly quiet and polite.
Oh, no, I don't think they would ever think that about me, but
you've done a pretty good job, I feel like, of keeping up with your friends.
Yeah, there's a core kind of group there's some friends that in the group that I've been friends with since high school, and then kind of a group of us became really close in undergrad. So we have a Snapchat group that we've had since, I think, 2016. People really have come and gone, but there's like a core group that has stayed. It's so much so that my friend whose wedding I'm going back for, he didn't add her to the Snapchat group until after he proposed. It was like, okay, you have to have a commitment before you can be added to the Snapchat group.
Like the family group chat.
Yeah, it is. And then like literally the day he was like, oh, this is the ring. He's like, oh, I proposed. And then 5 seconds later.
Hello, guys.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, hi. It was funny. Yeah. So that'll be really fun just to...
you're about to be in a lot of weddings.
Yeah, definitely. And then I have another Snapchat group with some other friends that we all worked together and went to school together in undergrad. So, I mean, we chat like daily, just kind of keeping up with our lives and, just
that's really cool.
See what everybody's doing, and nobody's really changed that much. I feel like so.
Yeah, I feel like my friends back home are like individual friends. Rather than groups.
Yeah.
We
kind of all were at the beginning, and then
it's cool.
We all lived together too. Yeah. Most of us did. So our house was kind of like the hub, so everybody came there.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So that'll be really fun to see everybody and.
Lots of catching up.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot because we're all in the wedding party too, so it's going to be really fun, but kind of crazy at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when I go home, it's very different because all my friends from both high school and college are in New York. Mm-hmm. And when I go home, I'm going to either my mom's or my dad's, and so none of my friends are there. So when I go home, it's like just family time.
Yeah. I talk with Jean a lot. Like I have these like weird waves of nostalgia where I'm like, I miss California and I miss like my life as an adult there, but like that happens in like a wave and it's done. Yeah. And then I go back and I'm super happy to be back for like 2 days and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go back to Paris.
Yeah. Well, I guess I wasn't really an adult in Charleston. I mean, I guess I was, but I graduated and then got a job, but then had to move out and so I moved in with my grandparents. And then COVID hit, and I worked for like a year, and then COVID hit. So then I lost my job. So it was like I didn't really have as much of the, living. Time. Yeah, and like I lived apart from my family in undergrad, but we were still, I was still a 15-minute drive from my house. So
when you think about COVID, because I feel like I lived a lot longer in LA than I did, but it's just because like COVID hit and like ruined everything, but then also brought things together.
Yeah. I was like, well, might as well apply for places in Paris because I have nothing else to do.
Literally same. I think we did the same thing.
I literally got sciatica from sitting in a chair.
Oh, God. They're just like, fuck it, we're doing our masters.
Yeah, exactly. I'd never planned on doing my masters, actually. Or like, if I'd planned on it, it was going to be, later on in life.
I only planned it if I was going to move abroad to do it.
Hey, it's a lot easier to get a student visa.
I didn't need one,
but you don't need one.
Yeah. It was, I was not interested in a master's at all. I hate school.
I like school.
I liked it when I went back for master's because it was like, oh, I'm actually interested in learning this.
That's what's nice about it.
And in undergrad too, when I had my psych classes and stuff, I was interested and I did a lot better than I did in high school.
Yeah.
But it's like I valued...
Well, like everybody here has a master's because education is free for undergrad. Mm-hmm. and master's is inexpensive. And so like back in the States, having a master's holds a bit more weight than it does here. It's also like a huge difference in salary usually. And like I'm one of the only people my age that I know that has a master's. I know like a couple people, but just because it's expensive.
And it's just a different system,
And
right?
it's a different system. And whereas in France, it's like if you don't, it's like finishing college.
Yeah,
like
their college is 2 years too.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, so like that's why I got my master's, because I envisioned myself living here, and I knew that like you really can't easily get a job here unless you have a master's, because it's considered like the completion of your degree. So that's why I got mine.
Yeah.
Just to like, I mean, it honestly feels like kind of like a box that you just need to check.
Yeah.
Feels a little bit silly, but
no, it's true.
But it's true. And I also was like, okay, if I go get my master's here, then I'll have some recognition, like name recognition when applying for jobs, which...
And now it's annoying because it doesn't have that much of a weight anymore. It doesn't hold that much of a weight. Like you have to have years of experience working rather than actual education.
And then they're like, if you really want to stand out, get a PhD. And I'm like, no.
Hell to the no.
My teacher told me once, only get a PhD if you want to teach what you're learning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because why would you need to know that much about something specific?
Like, unless you're going to be a doctor.
Oh, like, I mean, that's different, you know.
But yeah, if you're getting a PhD in what you guys studied, it's
no.
like, what the heck?
Why would I need that?
Yeah, that is a huge difference when you think of education. Because here it's like Beck, and then it's like Beck-Brusang, Beck-Brus, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember like a main reason why I decided to do my MBA instead of just a regular master's is because I wanted that international recognition.
Yeah.
In the case that I didn't like living in France and I wanted to go back to the US and have that, you know, like an MBA.
Yeah.
And now I think about it because, you know, that's the number one question people ask you when they know that you're American and you're living here is like, so when are you going to go back, or do you think you're going to go back? And it's like, no, actually.
Like, they always ask you why. They're like, why are you here?
Yeah, because their dream is to go there.
Their dream is to go there, but then they also, like, you know, it's just funny, like, when the three of us, people are like, oh, you're American, where are you guys from?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm from California. Oh, I'm from New York. I'm like, South Carolina. Ever heard of it?
And they're like, how'd you guys meet?
And then I'm like, I have to explain, okay, there's Florida, and then there's, you know, it's like the United States isn't necessarily the land of opportunity. It really depends on where you come from, and it's such a vastly different country. It's huge.
And the grass is always greener.
Yeah, and the grass is always greener,
but
for sure.
It was on our trip in Sardinia that I think one or two different people were like, oh, you never hear about, or it's different to hear about Americans wanting to leave and to come here because we all want to go there. And like, I don't know, for me now, thinking if I had to go back and live in the US, emphasis on had to, I would definitely live in New York. But even then, like now I still have, you know, the friends that I like to go and visit, but I don't feel like I have a life that I could slip back into in New York anymore.
Absolutely not.
It's been almost 4 years.
Well, everybody, like, people also grow with you, whether you don't see it or not, because I think the idea is like, oh, would I go back and I think of, like, my life that I left. That life doesn't exist anymore. You have to start back from scratch.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember on that same trip in Sardinia, there was a couple that was in the same industry that I'm working in, and like they were asking me about how it is in Silicon Valley because that's like the hub for biotech and whatever. And I was telling them like, yeah, the salary is tempting, and like you see that number and you're like, oh, I'm going there. But then you think of cost of living and tax and working hours and how you'd have to work probably like 10 to 12 hours a day if you wanted to work there. And there is no social life after work. It's
and
like,
there's no vacation.
No, there's no vacation.
Whereas like we could take a 2-hour flight to Sardinia. We could take a 2-hour flight to Sardinia and have everybody's like, oh, you're doing the European girl summer. I'm like, no, bitch, I live here. It's really cheap. It's a lot cheaper than your 8.5-hour flight. Like,
or 14 hours.
Yeah, or 14 hours from your side.
And this guy's like Italian, where like Italians really prioritize their family time, their friends, the time that they don't need to be working, like, you know. And so when he heard that, he was like, fuck no, like, I'm not going there. Like, absolutely not.
I do think Americans, I mean, again, I could get into a whole philosophical thing, but like value more commodities in things as opposed to kind of like time spent and experiences. And obviously this is a very broad, stereotypical thing, but it's really like, oh, I have the newest MacBook, I have the like biggest TV and like stuff like that, or I have the newest car. Whereas here, I mean, of course, people care about that too, but it's more like
not really.
But it's more like, oh, this is what I'm doing this weekend. I'm going to this music festival, or I'm going, to this restaurant, or I'm seeing people.
And everyone here has a small old apartment. Like it's not a competition.
Yeah.
Like when you pay too much rent, they're like, "Whoa, why are you doing that?" Like it's like so. It's like so opposite.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the U.S. it's like that because you're raised in that culture. But I think once you're taken out of that, like when our friends come and visit, like when Laura stayed for 3 months, she's like, "Oh my God, like this lifestyle is so much better." Like what?
And that's why like every time I go back, like I'm on my flight back to New York, I get this anxiety, and I'm like, turn the plane around.
Yeah.
Turn this damn thing around. I get so anxious. I'm like, why am I like going into this? And then I basically have to like kind of brace myself for
brace.
Oh God, I'm getting Transavia flashbacks.
Shout out to the small airlines that take us places for cheap, but a little bit sketchy
and a little bit delayed.
No tray tables, barely seatbelts.
Hey, I got exit row every time this time. I don't know
how you did that.
Yeah,
but I understand that anxiety, and I feel like when you see people going, like I think the number one thing I miss about Paris is terrace culture.
Yeah.
You go downtown and there's like no one.
Yeah.
And people are out with their families, but no one's really out with friends. And I feel like friend things aren't as big. Whereas here you see friends, people are out with their friends every single day after work. Like they're getting a drink at a bar or they're getting coffee at a cafe.
I will say that is what like my friend group in Charleston, we're like that. Like even though people dated within the group, some are getting married within the group. It's like it was always like a group thing. It was like,
did you guys stand out from others, or was that kind of the culture in Charleston?
It's a little bit more of that, like because people would go like after work and go get a drink together,
I
like
guess it's also
that type
the
of
South.
thing. Yeah, so or like you'd meet up as a group. Like it wasn't always, or like I would go just get dinner with somebody who's a friend. It wasn't always like family or dates or something. It's a little bit more just like hanging out with people and stuff like that.
That's nice.
Yeah.
But I think we can all say in conclusion we don't want to go back
to
the
US.
No. That does make me wonder though, because when I first moved abroad, and I think I talked about this, my living here was kind of like piecemeal and happened like bit by bit. And so at the beginning, it's like, oh, I'm going away for the year. And so your friends can kind of look forward to seeing you again. And then as time goes by, it's like they realize you're not coming back. And one of the things that I like sometimes get anxious about or worry about is like, oh, are these friends going to like want to keep in touch with me if I'm like indefinitely in a different country? And obviously the ones who are like true friends have, but it's like also realizing that some people might forget about you, and that's okay.
I think that was the scariest thing about leaving was all my friends saying like, well, when are you coming back?
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer for them.
Yeah.
So I would say, just to make like them feel safer, maybe in 2 years.
Yeah.
But I knew that wasn't going to be the case.
My friends knew. Like they knew I wasn't coming back.
The close friends knew.
The close friends knew. But like one of my good friends who I've known since high school, who's in that little group, he came and visited me. And, and they were, obviously all happy for me and on board for me moving, but they were, kind of curious about why, like I wanted to move, and he came and stayed with me for a few weeks, and he was like, and he had never been to Europe before. I think he'd been like a little bit out of the country, and he was like, Lucie, I just like really didn't understand why you moved here. And he's like this like Southern boy, and he's like, now I get it. Like, hey, he's like, now I completely understand like why you moved here. He's like, can I move here?
And that's the beauty of having.
It was cool.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, good for you. Like,
yeah. And that's why I love having people like that come and visit, because they can see why you
exactly
set up a life here and why you're staying. And
and then you have some who prefer their life in America, and they're like, good for you, and and that's great too.
Yeah. It's just about finding where you are happiest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we're so glad you joined us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Lucille.
We will have more of you, I hope.
Thank you.
Tell me you'll come back.
It's okay, I don't live far.
It's true. I can bear the 15-minute walk. On that note, we will see you guys next week. Indeed. Thank you, Lucie, and
à bientôt. Au revoir.